So, if you're like me, when you're trying to create music with Midi and digital and sample libraries, you want the tracks to sound realistic. So, I'm going to give you 5 tips that can help make your tracks seem realistic. Okay, tip number 1 is to use CC data. Now, this is very important. You want to use expression, modulation, and some libraries have like breathing and vibrato, stuff like that. So, what you want to do is you really want to utilize this. And if you have a MIDI controller with faders, or you can get a separate one, I would definitely suggest hooking this up and using this, and make sure you're programming for those. Make sure you're using CC1, CC11, a lot. That CC1 is modulation, CC11 is expression. Those are really the ones that are going to get you where you need to. And then sometimes some libraries will have vibrato and stuff like that. You just got to check with the sample library. But I would definitely recommend using modulations and expressions. And what this can do is it can help control the volume and it's be realistic. Because when a player is playing a line, they're gonna kind of be loud, and they're going to kind of come back a little bit. And what you have to do is really listen to a lot of recordings and the instruments and how they're sounding. So that's my tip, is to use CC data. And you just, like I said, you have to check with the library to make sure which library is using what CC data. Tip number 2, you have to leave room for breathing. I've heard a lot of tracks when people have melody lines going that it's just going and going and going. Now, if you're a real live player, especially like French horns, flute, stuff like that, they only have so much air that they can blow out a note. And if you're having them doing a very long line like forte or stuff like that, their air is going to run out a lot. So you really have to study orchestration. But what I would tend to do is, if you're trying to do that, sing the line yourself and at the force or the pressure that you're trying to get the instrument to sound. So if you're doing forte, try to mimic that and see how much air you have. Now, obviously, a professional player that, if you're going to have this played by real people, they might have a better breath pattern than you do, but it's a good sense to do what you have. So if you can't do it, then most likely the player or a player couldn't do that. But what this is going to do is it's going to make your tracks and your melody lines sound realistic, is what we're going here for. Because every player, if you listen to a lot of orchestral music or stuff like that, you'll hear them in there take a break, maybe a second pause or whatever, a bar, 2 bars to breathe real quick. Obviously as a professional, they have this down where they can do it really quickly. But that's just a good rule of thumb is, if you really need to sing the line, see how much breath you have and go from there. But always make sure you include a bar right there for, it's kind of like talking. If you just keep rambling on, that doesn't feel real. So just make sure you put those little commas, periods in your music and the breathing. So that really helps. All right, tip number 3, and this is, I think, is a really crucial one, and what I think music is lost a lot is dynamics. Make sure you're including dynamics. This kind of goes back to tip number 1 with CC data. You're going to achieve these dynamics from using CC data, and it's always good to use your expression module while you play, but include dynamics. You want you want loud parts, and then you want to kind of reflect that with soft parts. And that's bringing dynamics, and that's bringing realism. Because if you listen to a real orchestra, if you go to a real orchestra, I really recommend, if nobody's ever been to a real live orchestra concert, go. And you're going to learn so much about what an orchestra can and can't do. And you're going to notice that there's going to be soft parts in a song, and then there's going to be really loud and bombastic. It's not just always one straight line like this. And we tend to do that a lot in our music. We want it really loud and really powerful. But I think to achieve the epicness, or whatever we're going to call it today, doesn't really matter. Is you got to have some soft parts that will balance with loud parts, and it will seem more loud. It will seem louder if you put them up against each other. So I hope that helps. And to achieve this, what I recommend is, like I said, is you got to listen to a lot of music. You got to really listen to it and try to apply those dynamics in your music. And I think, for me personally, I think dynamics is huge, and that's what's going to make or break your track, is having real dynamics. Because of, like I said, real players, even in rock music, any music, there's dynamics. You have to really go and listen to it live with real players. That's what's going to tell you what an instrument or what music should sound like. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm just saying it's going to give you what a player is going to do. Because what we're trying to capture here is realism. Like if there's real people actually playing your piece. Tip number 4, articulations. Now, obviously, sample libraries today have a lot more articulations than they have in the past, but we're still not there. A player, like a string instrument, has so many nuances and articulation, so many things that we just are not there yet to capture it. But what you need to do is make sure you're using all the articulation patches that come with the sample library you have. Like I said, make sure you're putting in legato patches. Make sure you're really trying to you know replicate what a player is doing, because they're not just using legato all the time. They're mixing it up. They might use a staccato in with a legato, stuff like that. So try experimenting and using different articulations. Trying to use, maybe sometimes you can always double up on an instrument. Use a staccato with a or a pizzicato patch, to get a different sound. That's always, you can do that. What I would say is try to use more than just one articulations when you're doing lines. And also in Cubase, expression maps really help with that. Once you get all your expression maps in there, you could really start to play with and try these different patch, a legato with a sustained patch, and then with a staccato, like especially if you're emphasizing a note, like maybe if it's just a note that's going into a big longer note, I would use a staccato patch or maybe a spiccato. It just depends on what you're doing. I've tried that, and sometimes I've had success and sometimes I haven't. So give that a try. Just experiment and see what helps and what gets you there. But articulations, because if you listen to any piece or you read a piece of sheet music, you're going to see that they use a lot of different articulations. All right, my last tip, number 5, and this one probably seems like a no-brainer, but I think it needs to be emphasized once in a while, is play in the parts. Actually play in all the parts with your MIDI keyboard, and don't quantize. I know we get all hung up on this quantization thing, especially drums. You don't really want to drum parts. You don't really want to use quantization. Maybe you want to have one part, like maybe a bass part, or snares or something like that. I can see using some quantization, but maybe you want one track that's quantized, so it's kind of your framework, and then play off of that. Because if you listen to an orchestra, a rock band, they're never in time, but that's what makes it feel like humans playing. That's what gives it the realism, is not quantizing. If you quantize every track, it's going to feel really robotic, and it's not going to have that breathing and that movement that only humans can do. And so, I think we all get hung up on this, is like, I have to quantize, because it's all got to be in time. Like this, it's like, really, I know a lot of composers that they don't even use a click. They just play it, and then they might go back and adjust some stuff. But when you're listening to a live band or a live orchestra, you're not worried about the click. You're just listening. So try that. Don't quantize your parts. Just play them in, unless you really, really have to. I understand. Sometimes you have to get it on the grid. I get that. But I'm telling you, you're going to find your tracks will breathe and have dynamics and all this stuff if you play the parts in and you don't use quantization. I understand some parts are hard to play in. You can just play in the rough sketch and then go do your MIDI editing to tighten it up a little bit. But you'll find when you're playing, let's say you have a flute line and you have a string line. If you play them both in and don't quantize, there's just a feel to it. And then if you quantize it, you're going to lose that kind of human element. And what we're going here is to make your tracks seem real, like they're played by humans. At the end of the day, that's what you need to do. So I hope all these tips help. And like I said, the bigger overall picture here to really help you is you have to really study music, live music, and you have to study instruments and how people play these instruments and break them down. Maybe one week you study the horns, the next week you study woodwinds, and pick a day and study just one instrument and listen to solo instruments, solo pieces, like a solo flute piece, a solo French horn piece, like stuff like that, and really get that and listen to what they're doing, all their nuances, and try to capture that and put that into your music as soon as you can. I hope you like this video. If you do, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We have a lot of videos on here, a lot of content that will help new composers. And also, if you like, check down below. There is a Discord channel, the Composing Made Simple Discord channel, with a whole bunch of composers in there. If you need your tracks reviewed, you have questions on anything, there's somebody there to help you. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time.